Today was a good day. And today they actually had a little juice to their offense. And maybe it was just because the practice was different in terms of what they were doing than the practice that we saw Sunday that felt like it was at the end of a 40-day hike through the desert for the offense.
Which, in fairness to that practice, it had been the last leading up to their day off, which had been 3 straight practices. Today, they're coming off a day off, right? Nothing happened yesterday. They're refreshed. But regardless how they get here, I think from a football standpoint, him throwing the football, I see our guy Lombardi, who we were giving shit out in the practice field about his Excel spreadsheet, which I thank him for because
we weren't giving him shit like
no, we were. You did say there was an Excel ESPN Ocho
because I thought he was filling out the sheet on his phone.
He wrote, and again, like we're not tallying. This is his tally, 14 of 19. But I think it's very fair. What we witnessed was a very accurate day. Was just, to me, my number one takeaway is like, if you didn't know Trey Lance, you're just like, Kyle Shanahan starting quarterback, you'd be like, they just felt like a high-level offense. It was just a very, very functional offense where there have been other practices that went like, this is a disaster. And he's not alone. If you've read about Mac Jones, the other practices all over, Jalen Hurts has had bad days. Guys have bad days. But this today was a very positive day. I think easily, just like you said, from a vibe standpoint, urgency standpoint, but I think it kind of started with him. That was like they're winning football games. He plays like that.
Yeah. It was a good day. And, it was a real day. It felt like real football. And maybe that's part of it occurred to me driving home after practice, like part of Trey Lance, part of any player who has upper echelon physical skills, there are just things they can do in a game that won't show up as much in practice, right? And I think that's part of the bet with him, is that there are just things that he'll do in games that there's not really opportunities for in practice. But it wasn't just about that. I just thought he was quick with the ball, came out quickly. His decision-making was a lot quicker than we saw. Remember that red zone period we watched last week? It felt like they're in a rhythm because they would run a play. They ran a hurry up. I turned to you at one point and said, this looks so good. Would you run hurry up on the first possession of the game against the Bears, the first possession of the season? It's not Kyle style at all. And there's no real reason to do it other than if you think your quarterback is comfortable with it. And you said, and you can say why you didn't like that idea, but I thought he just looked really comfortable in a situation that felt like real football instead of we're just doing drills and throws and drills and throws and drills and throws. He had one, and again, hard to say. There wasn't, pass rush can't hit him, whatever. But a sort of a play breaks down. He gets out of the pocket, and here comes Ayuk back across the field, and he just led him perfectly as Ayuk probably, back and forth ran 70 yards on the play. And it was beautiful. It's exactly the type of kind of off-schedule play that, great quarterbacks make.
Well, I think you and I talked about this on the practice field today. It felt like some practices, and this is literally the point of training camp, is just we're running plays to run deep passing routes. Like we're just trying to run 15-plus yard routes and work on that, which is not normally how you'd play a game, right? Especially, obviously if you're down 10 points in the last 2 minutes, you're throwing deep. But today felt, and you mentioned this on the field, like there's an ebb and flow to the play calling. Like they scripted it like outside zone here, quick screen left, zone read back. Like it just felt like a Kyle drive where a lot of practices felt like Kyle would never call these 3 straight plays.
Yeah.
But like we said, in training camp, you're working through stuff. It doesn't matter. Now, you script the plays, but I thought today was much more reflective of the ebb and flow that you would see in a game. And some stuff didn't work. Like the Shanahan offense has some. One thing, Rodgers actually said this on his Pardon My Take interview, is he's like, listen, I've been in this offense. Majority of my life, I was in the West Coast offense. He's like, the West Coast offense isn't necessarily a scheme. It's all about timing. It has every single play, but everything is based off 3 steps, 5 steps, 7 steps. Everything is just timing. He's like, this offense is scheme-oriented. And he's like, there are some flaws in this scheme. And you saw one today, right? If the backside defensive end does not bite on the play action boot, the quarterback is fucked, right? It is just, and then the tight end has to like leap. It is a disaster play because it's basically a one route throw. Whoever is peeling back when the quarterback turns, if it works 20 yards, the guy could walk for 20 yards. When it doesn't work and the linebacker covers them and the defensive end attacks the quarterback, it does look bad, whether your quarterback's Mahomes or whether your quarterback's mirror you. And there was a play today where it was, and when Roger said scheme has flaws, I think he's talking about specific things like that. A lot is predicated on you just going with my guys, right? The old Coughlin, the nakeds and the nudes. The whole offense, a lot of the passing game is not West Coast, just like 3 steps, throw. I mean, I'm not saying Kyle doesn't have those play calls, but when it's rolling, it's all based on the run game, kind of moving left and moving right. And then all of a sudden, when he gets you going, and that's what it felt like today, you're just you're against the ropes. Where for a large percentage of the camp, when they're just throw only, which we know Kyle is the opposite, it's like they can kind of tee off. It's like, we know they're throwing in this drill. And this is where practice, it's all we can go off of, but is not normal, right? Because standing on the sideline, there's not really a down and distance. You know, they're getting 3 reps and the defense knows it's all pass, right? We're just working on 3rd and long. Well, what if you're doing 3rd and long, what do all the defensive line knows? Like 100% they're passing. They won't even fuck around and do like a delayed handoff or anything. So to me, training camp is a little manipulated that way, especially over time and specific, because even team drills, it's the best part of training camp by far to watch, is a manipulated situation, right? It's not like, oh, let's do pinned at the 2. Well, there was no kick or anything that got them there. They just all walk down there and they stand like, let's start. It's cool, but it's not normal football, the ebb and flow to get there. So you could argue today was just much more, it felt like just first down, you could run anything. They could run the ball, they could throw the ball, and it felt just a little more football-y, and Trey excelled than just like, hey, guys, he's throwing it every time. It's not even all his fault. Like, hey, Aaron Banks, there is no threat of run here. You know your pass blocking, and the D tackle's like, I'm just fucking going right at him, right?
Yeah, and it also felt like they were calling the plays themselves felt like plays you'd be more likely to call in a game, right? Higher percentage throws. That was part of it too.
Some quick outs.
Yeah, some of these 20, like these deep sideline throws to Debo, we might see them 2 or 3 times in a practice. I don't think we'll see those once a week once the season starts, right? So, yeah, I mean, I just
not at this rate.
Well, there are so many other things they can do, and it just felt to me like this is what it's going to look like once games start. So
and maybe there was some emphasis too today on, and I'm sure I'm not saying he felt pressure, but like, his practice Sunday, would have been Sunday, was just, statistically and from the eye test, pretty shitty. It looked, and it's not all his fault. The offense as a whole was pretty bad. I would imagine a point of emphasis this morning in the offensive team meeting before they went out to practice was like, we need a day, fellas. Like that. Yeah. We kind of got clowned.
Yeah.
And now that's happened multiple times. The last time Ayuk started fighting people, today, no fights, just high level play, which is good.
Yeah.
You'd like to respond.
It's why I said after the Sunday practice, you asked a good question, something I hadn't really thought about until we started talking about it, was like, what's worse, the interceptions or the incompletions? And I hadn't thought of it that way. And my answer was the incompletions in practice. Today, he almost threw that play you described where the backside end did not bite on the fake. I think it was 92 Kerry Hyder is just coming downhill at Trey, and Trey's backpedal, giving ground, puts it up to one of the backup tight ends, and there's one of the DBs and Fred Warner, and Fred comes flying out, gets his hands on it, hits the ground hard out of bounds, ball pops out, not an interception. But that's an interceptable ball, right? Fred almost could have intercepted it. I'd have a big problem with that throw. My bigger problem is when you miss throws that you're trying to hit in one-on-one coverage and it's not a catchable ball. And there wasn't, I mean, we're not talking about like some of these pylon throws where they're just going through one-on-one DB receiver drills. We're putting that aside. I just thought everything was, I don't think he had any of those really bad misses today in team drills. And it was
very crisp day.
Yeah, it was exactly. It was a crisp day. There was one deflected ball, but it still got out to the receiver in the flat. Those short passes, he made them. I don't think he missed any of those short, kind of swing passes.
Hit them all.
So it was a professional move. It wasn't like, I think you said it best to start this. If you walked out and said, there's QB1, you'd go, yeah, okay, that's QB1. This thing just looked like a well-oiled machine today.
And there have been days when it didn't feel like that. Not saying Sudfeld's ever looked better than him, because I don't take Sudfeld necessarily that seriously. But there have been days when you go, and listen, he's going to have bad games, but when you have a bad practice, that's all you can go off of. I'm like, God, that was ugly. And you just can't change your mind until the next practice.
He's going to have bad halves, right? This happens. Like, you have a bad half. How do you respond in the second half? You have a bad drive. How do you that's the other thing about these practices. We go to Sundays, we go to whatever. In a real game, you come off the field, you look at the stuff, you talk to Kyle, you talk to Bobby Slowick, you talk to Anthony Lynn, you talk to your teammates, you go back out and have another drive. You come back off the field. Somebody up in the booth says this, that. You come back onto the field. You go into the locker room. You're making adjustments the whole time. And, that's not really happening in some of these practices. So it's like all of this stuff is adjustments. Who did I hear say this on Monday? I was listening to somebody talk. I don't remember, but it was a player just talking about like the whole thing is everything is adjustments. Everything. It's adjust, then you adjust to them, then they adjust back, then you adjust back. And so, those are things you don't really have opportunities to fix in practice. But it's the story of the position. You're going to make a critical error. Do you then come back and make another sweet play? You're going to throw a pick six. Do you come back and lead a drive? You're going to get hit in the mouth. Do you pop back up and stand in the next time the blitz comes? And those are the things that, like, in a game, you get to do, 3 weeks worth of practice experiences all in one game. And he hasn't had a lot of that. That's why I think you and I have been talking for a long time about him. It's just the number one thing we both have, and I think we've been saying this for a while. He just needs to play football games, and he'll be better in the fifth one than he was in the first one. He just needs to play games.
Yeah.
The question is, can he play games? And the way we watch all these practices, can they win while he's learning? That's the point, because this is a championship contender.
I think it's very dependent on the opponent when he has a bad game. Could they beat the Bears if he has an average game? Of course. Are they beating the Broncos or the Rams or the Chargers or the Chiefs? When he has down games, and it's inevitable, right? Some of their losses are going to come against good teams when he plays bad. And hell, he might have a good game where they lose too. I mean, it's football, right? I mean, Aaron Rodgers won the MVP. They don't win every game. So it's just, you just got to find, to me, a way to build this thing. And part of it is like, I think you kind of have a knowledge, or you have like an understanding of how you want to play. But there is a feeling out process with him specifically, right? What he can do, what he can't do, how much I can put on him. In some of these, he's only played 2 games. I think there's a learning out process, I don't know, with the head coach who's also the play caller. Because there were some moments today, and we can get into like the running, like how much you're going to run him, how much is just he naturally going to take off, that you only truly know that as time goes on. Like, Dayball, I guess, no longer is in Buffalo, but toward the end, like him and Josh, he knew how to operate, right? What Josh could do, what he didn't want him to do, what Josh could kind of freelance on his own. Andy Mahomes that way. I think Lamar and Greg Roman, who've been together the whole time, like they're not starting from scratch because they had last year, but they're starting from scratch of like, this is now a marathon, right? We got 17 of these things. There's an ebb and flow. And even Kyle says, like, I do things to set up future things. Like, it's a big picture, but it's all with Trey in mind, right? And to me, there's a learning process for Trey individually. There's a learning process with Kyle and Trey working together. And then Kyle, just the play calling standpoint of the strengths and weaknesses. Like, he knows the strengths and weaknesses of Debo. Like, he knows the strengths and weaknesses of Kittle and even Ayuk. And even you would say their offensive line. Like, their offensive line and Trey, just what those guys in the middle, what their strengths are. They're just going to be a learning process to me early in the season. And you could argue the entire season, at least the first half, to then propel into the second half of like what we're really good at, what we're not good at, what, I shouldn't even ask this guy at this point in time. We can figure this out next year. I don't need to force this.